Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you very much to the organizers. I think this is a wonderful thing that you've been doing by bringing us all together, because we all work in our, this is an age or a time when we start our projects, but we don't talk enough to one another. And I think this is really important. And also, something that is emerging when you sit here and listen to all these talks is there's a lot of, these digital humanities projects, they're altruistic, not to say Sisyphic, and there's something kind of heartwarming to listen to all these efforts in this Kaliug of people actually trying to do something for the community. So thanks, and thanks for making this possible. I know I'm the last speaker, and your thoughts are probably on the reception now and the drinks and so on, so I'll try to be as lively as I can. And there are two parts for this presentation. In the first part, I'll present the project. It's not a demo. I'll present PANDiT Project. And in the second part, as time allows, I'll try and let you play with the system, okay? It's PANDITproject.org is on the web. And you can play with it here with me guiding you, or later at home. You can try it at home, okay? It's allowed. So what I'll do in the first half is I'll begin by presenting very briefly the history of PANDiT Project, not because it's interesting in and of itself, but because it will demonstrate how a person like me, who has no background in anything that's digital, let alone digital humanities, came to understand what he's doing, and maybe why he should have known better not to do it in the first place. So PANDiT, what is PANDiT? PANDiT stands for Prosopographical Database for Indic Texts. Okay, I know that there's nothing for an N there, but that's okay. It also stands for Pandit, Panditwa, which I think Panditya doesn't need an introduction. And it began, and I'll tell you very briefly about this, it began for me when I got a research grant about 7 years ago to work on Appaya Dikshita. He's a 16th century Sanskrit scholar from South India, a polymath. I wanted to do a niche database dedicated to his works. There are supposedly 100 or 104 or 108 works written by Appaya Dikshita. There was no good list of these. I just wanted to do a niche database of these things for my own purposes, okay? And I won't tell you about that project, but I'll tell you what I thought I should be doing, okay? I thought I should create index cards, okay? This is prosopography, right? This is not a database of texts. This is metadata about texts and people and places and the relationship in manuscripts and the relationship between them, okay? So I said, here's an example, okay, of the thought process that went into this. Let's do something that looks like an index card, a digital index card of a work, okay? For example, a work called the Rasika Ranjani. Let's do an index card for a person, in this case, Gangadhara Vajpayee, who happens to be the author of the Rasika Ranjani. Let's do a digital index card of a site, Varanasi, Benares, where this work was produced. No, that doesn't lead us anywhere. All we did was to pour old wine into new bottles. We didn't learn anything in the process, okay? Now we have one box work, one box person, one box site, no good, okay? So now you're looking at the back system, at the forms behind the system that you can play with as soon as you register for PANDiT. And I am in the Rasika Ranjani form, and I'm connecting it. If you can see, I'm connecting it through this menu to the person, to the author who's already in the system, Gangadhara Vajpayee. And I'm doing the same for the place in which it was composed, Varanasi. And now, when I look up the Rasika Ranjana, I have the author, who is clickable, and the site was also clickable, Varanasi. And when I look at Gangadhara Vajpayee, I see that one of the works he composed is Rasika Ranjani, And when I look at Benares, I see that one of the works composed here in our database is the Rasika Ranjani, okay? So, and actually I had to take out the Google map for the first slide because it's automatically created for every site in our website, okay? And you begin to see that this is a slightly more complicated model that we came up with. We have a work, and it's related to a site in which it was composed and to a person by whom it was composed, okay? And in that way, a work can be related to a work. So this is, again, back to the form of the Rasika Ranjani, and this is a commentary on a work by Apaya Dikshita, the Kuvalananda. The actual works don't matter here. It's the architecture that I'm trying to show. And now, if you look at the Rasika Ranjani, you see that this work is a commentary on the Kuvalananda. There is a graphical language here of what comes in the right and what comes in the left, and you see that there's a positive and negative and all kinds of nice ideas. And then if you look at the Kuvalananda, it immediately registers that it has a commentary on it, which is the Rasika Ranjani, okay? So now we have a work that's related to a work in addition to being related to a site and a person. And a person can be related to a person. So the person who composed the Rasika Ranjani was sponsored by was sponsored by Shahaji of Tanjore. So we connect them, and now you see that Gangadhara Vajpayee was patronized by Shahaji, but if you go to the Shahaji, you see that he was the patron of Gangadhara Vajpayee, right, left, okay? So now the slightly more complicated model, and this is the original design that we had. People can be related to people in all kinds of ways. They can be the gurus, the students, the friends, the enemies, the spouses, the sons, the daughters, and so on. So they can be related to the sites in all kinds of ways, and works can attack works. They can be commentaries on works. We were ready to go, and then we said, no, we don't want to do this niche database. And it's an important point in my thinking about the project, and that's why I told you this short history. This is when I decided I'm not going to do a database that it's derived by a research question that I had, but do something much more ambitious that has nothing to do with necessarily my own research questions, okay? I realized that the platform that we have was too powerful to waste on one person because we are working, as I'll explain, with a system that is almost infinitely elastic and almost infinitely capacious. So why just put the works of one person there? And I also realized that if we're serious about what we're doing, we're not going to be working on just one person because Apaya Dikshita sitting in the 16th century on a whole library of texts, writing in Mimamsa, writing in Vedanta, writing in grammar, writing in Alankara Shastra, referring to all these works. If we're serious about what we're doing, we'll have to refer to all these works ourselves, to open index cards for all these works, relate them in such a way, open index cards for their authors. So at least for the Sanskritic tradition, we will be creating a much wider thing. So why do an Apaya Dikshita database to begin with? So I didn't. Okay, instead I started PANDiT. But you can't start typing in the millions of Indic texts that exist and the zillions of manuscripts that exist and so on. So the first approach was the factory approach that Andrew was speaking about. We said, let's import wholesale databases that already exist and see how they work on our system. So the first thing we went to at that point, I remembered that in an earlier incarnation, I was part of SKSec. We also had a database there. Jim remembers that. And by this is, if you go to Sheldon Pollock's website at Columbia, and you come to the Sanskrit knowledge systems, and if you click here on the biobibliographical database, nothing will happen. it's a dead end. And it's a problem to keep in mind, okay? So we got all the files of works and manuscripts and authors and places and imported them onto PANDiT. And before opening PANDiT, before going on the air of the, we went to another database. We went to Karl Potter's bibliography of Indian philosophies, and people who work on philosophy know this online tool and use it a lot, but it's really just a list, it's not searchable in any easy way, and we just digitized the whole thing and wrote a code that dumped it into PANDiT, okay? This took about a year and a half of work, okay? A lot of work. And we also had to revise our structure because there were things that when we started our work, we didn't think about. So now we also had manuscript, we also had bibliography. This is the main purpose of the Karl Potter database. It's not our main mission, but we, along the way, imported 35,000 bibliographical items from Karl Potter, so we had to deal with it somehow, imperfectly. I'll explain later. We had the institution and so on, and the kinds of relationships also complicated, okay? And at that point, we went online, we opened the website, but we also started in a way that I'll explain later, a workshop import that's going on right now that fills me with some optimism and joy. And this is, we got permission. Everything, by the way, is with permission. We're not stealing any information. So we, to our amazement, succeeded in getting permission from BORI, from the Mandarkar Oriental Research Institute, to do a pilot project with their descriptive catalogs of Vedanta. So, they have a huge manuscript collection, of which at least 1,000 manuscripts are Vedanta. There is an excellent descriptive catalog in 3 volumes. We received permission from them to take all the data and put them on PANDiT. And this is done in collaboration with a team in Toronto. I'll explain the nature of this collaboration in a minute. And we are working in a workshop manner. This is not code-generated. The team in Toronto is putting, and the information in this is important because it includes excerpts from the text, okay? So we created a whole new structure for these excerpts, like openings and closings and Mangala shlokas and things like that. And these are put onto a Word document by people at Toronto, and then somebody is overlooking them and putting it into PANDiT. And so we had to further expand and redesign our structure. And now you can see that we have a manuscript up there, manuscript that's related to the extracts, that is related to works, both of them, to person, to institution, to site, to print, bibliography that is, and also to all kinds of labels that we introduced along the way. For example, the discipline, the language, the genre, the state of the current state of India or South Asia in which something was produced, a social identifier for a person, and so on. So this is the short history of this thing, and it's evolving, and I assume that with our future imports that I'll talk about in a sec, this will continue to evolve. It's very elastic, and we can change the structure. Okay, so now we have, as of yesterday, before I added a few entities, we had 50,000 something entities on PANDiT, of which the bulk is bibliography from Potter, but we have close to 10,000 works, close to 4,000 people, a nice amount of manuscripts, already a big chunk of extracts from this BORI import that's going on, and some sites and institutions where we're week. Okay? That's the history. Now, what are the guiding principles of PANDiT? Okay, that were evolved in this shift from a niche database that's serving one's own purposes to a kind of a more community-oriented, broad prosopographical database. First, we want to have a database that is truly broad, truly deep, and truly relational. And I'll explain each of these briefly. Truly broad, and I started with one person working just in Sanskrit, but this is about Indic text. This is very ambitious. There's no limitation of language, of genre, of region, and so on. So it should be truly broad. Truly deep, the project has no floor and no ceiling, okay? Simple as that. It's very ambitious. And it's truly relational, and that's key. Everything that's in the database has to be related to at least some other thing in the database. That's the way we can learn new things from it, okay? Because and as you'll see, it's a community-based, it's a crowdsourcing thing. So I enter something about Gangadhara Vajpayee, and Gil enters something about his cousin that was working, I don't know, in the Kannada speaking region, and whatever he does immediately links to whatever I do, and I can learn something I didn't know, and we can produce new knowledge. I don't want to be in that mode that we just, dump something we already know into nice boxes on some shelf. It has to be relational, okay? Okay, second thing, it has to be open. All the information is open. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to log in. You don't have to create an account. All the data are there, accessible. There's nothing hidden. Okay. Everything is free. No fee is required. Okay. And everything is entirely transparent. Everything I explained and more is also explained on the website. I'll show you in a second. Okay. Everything that we do has to be entirely transparent. Another thing, it has to be interoperable, platform and concept-wise. What do I mean by that? Very briefly, platform-wise, we did not write our own code. Okay, we did not invent our own system, nor did we use a commercial product that only people who buy are licensed to use. So we are using Drupal. And Drupal is the most widely used and most widely trusted content management system. It will not last forever. One day, people will. I'm talking here about things I don't understand. Okay, I'm just repeating what my tech people tell me. This is stuff that's under the hood. I don't care about stuff that's under the hood. I care about where the car is going. But what the people who know what the engine tell me is, Drupal is, they're moving now from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, and maybe one day Drupal will dissolve and become something else. But the way the information is structured, we can transfer what we've done to this something else. And there's no reason why what's here in PANDiT will not last for, I don't know, a millennium. Okay, so that's platform. And concept-wise, I don't want to invent any wheel here. Okay, so I want to be able to work with other systems and other projects working on prosopography or text or any digital humanities project within or outside Indology. At least that's the intention. It's not always easy to work with other people. First, or with other projects. First, because not everybody is willing to cooperate, and second, because some of these other projects are yet to emerge. So some of the standards are yet to emerge, but the idea is that we in PANDiT should always be sensitive to these standards and try to make room for them. So there are fields, currently empty fields for VIAF that was mentioned here, for example, and other things. And the idea is that we want to be interoperable with standards, with the standards in the field within Indology and beyond Indology. For example, South Asia, you know, it's a fuzzy definition, but we have texts traveling from South Asia to Persia and the Middle East. We have people traveling from South Asia to Southeast Asia. We want to be able to connect to these other worlds of knowledge, and that's the principle here. Okay. Now we want to be sustainable, both finance. I don't want PANDiT to undergo the same fate that SKSec has undergone before we came and rescued it. So we have to find kind of financial models and working models that will make it possible, and I'll talk about these challenges in a second. And we want to be connected. And maybe this is a little bit pretentious to be the hub of the community of scholars, but this is a unique project. It's not a text project. It's not a manuscript project. It's not a dictionary project. It's not a bibliography project. But there are many ways in which it makes sense for all these projects to be connected to PANDiT and to PANDiT to be linked with them. And I'll show you how in a second. Okay, so how are these principles that I just described, how do they work in practice? Let me give you a few examples, okay? For one thing, we are open to the community. And what I want to show you here is everybody who wants to register so far, 4 people from this room have registered. I give you the permissions to be a contributor to begin with. And this is the permission. The only reason I'm showing this slide is that both contributors and editors can create and edit an entity. In short, once you register, you're given the keys to create and alter information on PANDiT. Doesn't matter what the name of the permission is, okay? We're very liberal. People always ask me the question of what happens if somebody sabotages the data or tries to bring Hindutva ideology or this or that question. I'd love to be in a situation where we're so popular and important and have that problem, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Currently, the problem is the opposite problem, which is how to make you guys contribute to PANDiT, okay? I'll talk about this. Okay, so the idea is to have a community, to have currently we have about 70 people in the small but growing, constantly growing community of PANDiT, and you create an account, and then you add information that you have at your fingertips, right? I'm not asking anybody to do research especially for PANDiT, but each and every one of us has tons of data on their computer about the text they're working on, about the manuscript they're working on, in their language, in their region, in their discipline. Just put some of that data here, and very quickly we will become a very useful database. Transparency, I talked about transparency. You go to our About button, click it, and you go to Types and Relationship, and you click on the Configuration Spreadsheet. And boy, what you'll see there is just blow your mind. All the fields, all the types of the relationships, everything, tags and tags and tags. I don't understand half of it myself, but my tech person can explain it to me if I need to. All of that is there. Everything that I explained and much, much more is available, and you can read it. And if you have suggestions or problems with it, let me know. Okay. Now, here's a problem. We want to work with crowdsourcing. We want people to contribute with their time. But as explained earlier on, people, our academic institutional setting is not such that it approves of this. So if you say, well, I created or edited 50 entities on PANDiT, it would not make a big impression maybe on your tenure case, okay? On your tenure file. So we have to change that. And one way of changing that, one small way, is that we give credit for the people who create PANDiT. So if this is the nice example, by the way, of the index card of a guy named Venkatappa, okay, who lived in the late second half of the 16th and first half of the 17th century. And we have a lot of information about him on PANDiT, and really a nice example. If you look down at the bottom, you see that Jonathan Peterson gets credit for this. He's the contributor, and if you cite PANDiT in your work, we would tell you how to the suggested citation. So that's one thing we're doing for this. What is this? Okay, so another important thing that's shared to some of the other projects that we've seen so far in terms of transparency, every change that is made to an entity in PANDiT can be traced to the person who did it, who made it, who done it, and so we can compare. So if we look again at Tanjavur, there's even an image here of Tanjore. And if we look at the, so up here, we are in the view mode, but if you click here, this is the revisions mode, and this is what you'll see. You'll see two revisions, and you can compare them. You press here, and you'll see exactly what the difference is between the two of them and what Lou Bernard changed it based on the original version that was there, okay? And at what date and at what time, which is why we're asking you to tell us what your standard time zone is when you contribute to PANDiT, so we can calculate this. Okay. One more thing about openness. We just recently added this feature, the CSV button at the bottom of each search page. I'll say something about the searches, which means by the click of a button, you can download all the data to your computer with a spreadsheet or whatever method that you want, okay? This is still in the pilot stage. This is just of the recent month, but there may be additional buttons. We're debating whether we should do a TEI button or not. I'd be happy to hear the views of people. But we're not just letting you see all the data, but we're letting you take it home, okay? Honestly, I don't think it's very important at this stage because the database continues to evolve. So if you download the data, you download what immediately becomes an outdated version. But if you want to run all kinds of tests on it, or you want to play with it on your computer with your tools, take it. I'll say something about the search options. There are two search options for PANDiT. One is a kind of a general search option that's very sophisticated and very sensitive. So I just clicked Surabhi, and it came out as the first name of Surabhi who wrote some bibliography item in 1975, but also as part of the name Vidya Surabhi, who wrote a commentary on Sureshwara's Naishkarmya Siddhi. Okay, that's the general search that's at the top of the website, but you can also search each and every content type, like works, people, places, sources, and you can refine the search of works, for example, by genre. There are many more genres here by language and so on. So it's and authors, years, and so on. So that's very helpful. So right now, even though there are many shortcomings for PANDiT in terms of the data, and I'll talk about them in a second, for people who were just using, let's say, Potter's bibliography, they're so much better off to search the bibliography here on PANDiT than they are on the database that's online, which is just a printed list, okay? That's not relational, you don't know what is a bibliography on what, you don't, and so on. So people don't know this, but just for the people who are working on Potter's philosophy, let alone the other information, our search capabilities serve them better. Okay, now let's talk about the durability and the financial models that I'm looking at. So, you know, this is all initially funded by all kinds of grants that I just got, but that's not a durable situation, because I'll at some point get tired applying for grants. It's very tiring, as you know. But we're doing collaboration. So this is my friend and colleague Ajay Rao at the University of Toronto. He applied for SSHRC money. SSHRC is the Canadian equivalent of the NEH. And they applied for a project on Vedanta, of which I happen to be a part. And part of the project was meant to put these data on PANDiT that I showed you earlier from like the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute descriptive catalogs. And the neat thing about this collaboration is I don't get any of that money, okay? The money stays at Toronto University, and Professor Rao pays his graduate students to do the work. And so it's for the benefit of his students and for the benefit of PANDiT. And I think that's a winning formula. So what I think we should all do is that when we apply for grants, there should be money allotted as part of the budget for data entry in a project like PANDiT that stays. I don't want your money. I just want the community to be involved. Okay, so we're now doing more projects like this. David Shulman just got a very big European Research Council, ERC grant that has a PANDiT component of it. I'm talking with Dominic Wojcicki, who is applying for some money at the University of Alberta that will have a PANDiT component, things like that. I think this should become something that we do. It's not, I think there's a tendency here, you know, people think, well, why should I work for Yigal's Bronner's project when I can work on mine? But this is not, I don't think of PANDiT as my project. In fact, I think of it as something taking me away from my projects. And I think we should work together and try and see how we can get our own students. They're the real workforce, because first they need work and they need money. And second of all, they grew up with computers at their fingertips. I didn't, you know. I did most of my education without a computer. Okay, I only bought my first computer when I came to Chicago and started as a graduate student. Okay, so no wonder I don't understand things under the hood, but they know it much more intuitively. Okay, so I think we should explore these things far more. So here is Jonathan Peterson, who is Ajay's graduate student, who does wonderful work for PANDiT, and he oversees a whole team of graduate students there, and some of my graduate students also work on this, and we've made huge progress with the Bori catalogs, even though it's not a factory thing, it's a workshop thing, but once you get rolling, you see the results, and these excerpts these manuscript excerpts, like we've seen in the previous presentation, they have a lot of prosopographical information. They tell you who the scribe was, where he was, what the dates were. We can use that information in PANDiT in a way that's immediately relational, okay? So for example, hello, the Vitala Panchavimshati guys there in the back. Can somebody call their attention? So, for example, the Vitala, you showed us information about a scribe called Yadava, okay? If that scribe was a person on PANDiT, if he was maybe a scribe for other kinds of manuscripts, not just Vitala Panchavimshati manuscripts. He may have owned some things. He may have been the father or the son or the spouse of some other person. If we create an entity for him here, we can connect him to other things that he is, not just as his role in the scribe of this one Vitala Panchavimshati manuscript, but we should find ways of working together. We don't even have an entity here for Vitala Panchavimshati, let alone any one of these wonderful manuscripts that you've been working with so good metadata. So that's the kind of, I think that's the kind of collaboration we should be looking for. We don't even have a Kaviraj entity, Andrew, on our website. So yeah. Another thing is, so here's my profile here. You can, for each person, you have a profile. You can see what that person is doing. You can follow that person. You can follow that person. So I want to do whatever Andrew is doing when he's on PANDiT, and I can just get into my account and I see what he's doing. Or I can follow. Let's say I'm interested in a specific Marathi work, okay, or Kannada work. I can follow, in my account, I can say that I want to know everything that has to do with bhakti, or anything that has to do with Marathi, or with specific genre. And so each and every bit of information comes up, okay? Okay, so this is about the principles and how that we put them into practice. Of course, there's more and more that we can do, and I'll say something about this. Now let me just tell you about some of the problems that we have, okay? Because I don't want to present a very rosy picture where it isn't, okay? So one problems that, most of the problems are data quality, okay? The quality of PANDiT is the quality of the data that we inherited from our imports, okay? So SKSEC was very imperfect. Potter was very imperfect in some ways, and also very idiosyncratic in the way you recorded data. Bori is actually excellent, but nothing is perfect. But because of the broad and deep ambition of PANDiT, PANDiT now is, first of all, something like a slice of Swiss cheese that has more holes than cheese in it, okay? It's just we have islands of very good data surrounded by vast oceans of nothing, okay? So for PANDiT, the point is, for PANDiT to become useful for the community, for the community to be involved in PANDiT, PANDiT has to be useful for the community. It's a kind of a catch-22. And for it to be useful for the community, much more data has to be put on. So I imagine a world in which each scholar, she or he will wake up in the morning, will open their computer and see what happened in their field overnight in PANDiT, and maybe they'll learn something new and write a new paper about it, or do some manipulation with that data in a way that we'll look at. So we're not there yet, and by any means. Another problem that we had and solved was duplications. So we imported data from different sources. Take a look at this. Yeah, so this, just very quickly, we imported this from SKSEC, a text called Nyaya Kusumanjali, and we imported this from Potter. And they're the same text. by Udayana in Sanskrit. It's the same text. But the information is not identical, right? The information is not identical because Potter, and that's why we got the data from Potter, shows you how many commentaries exist on this work, okay? And the SK-Sec tells you something that actually Potter doesn't know, that this work endorses the Atma Tattva Viveka, okay? So we went through the whole list of works in PANDiT. We found all, I hope, maybe 99% of the suspect duplicates. We merged the data, hand merged the data, and now we have just one entity called the Nyaya Kusumanjali that endorses the Atma Tattva Viveka, and that has all these following commentaries on it. And we made a record. There's a separate, somewhere on the website, there's a separate table of all of the works that were suspect as duplicates, and you can check us and verify whether we made a mistake or not. And some we couldn't tell. Some we just couldn't tell if they're the same person with the same name or not. But I think we resolved almost all of them. This will continue to be an issue because there are millions and millions of Vishnus and Venkatas and so on in Indic history, okay, and Krishnas. Okay, but still, the data is poor. So I have at least 1,300 works that don't list an author. Now, sometimes we don't know the author. Maybe it's not a problem. We just don't know who the author is. There is a category of anonymous works. But I'm sure that if I had the money and a graduate student to go through this and check every item at the NCC and other such sources, we would be able to enrich the data in a considerable way. So this Advaita Sudha, for example, who wrote the Advaita Sudha? I'm sure if we actually looked at the scholarship about this and see who wrote this commentary on the Raghuvamsha, maybe we could find an author for this, but we need the human power to do this. We have labels in the work, in the database, like discipline, Chandas, Dharmashastra, Jyotishastra, Nyaya, Vishishtadvaita, Vyakarana, and so on and so forth. These are all Sanskrit-oriented, but they're labels. There's no reason why they should all be Sanskrit-oriented. It's just the history of the work here. But none of them come with any language explaining what this discipline is in the description field, okay? I did this for, where is this? I did this for Alankara Shastra, which is a field I know a little bit about, but other people should do it for other disciplines, okay? There are other problems that we inherited, like here's a guy called Rajashila of Karatara Gacha. That's not his name. His name maybe is Rajashila, and his Gacha should be in the social identifier. So what can I do? This is how Potter called him. So somebody should go through, and somebody is going through the database and cleaning this stuff, but that's a problem. And nobody was ever called Parameshvara 1 and Parameshvara 2. Again, this is something that we have to correct. So, but we inherited the data, and much of them exists as they are. Okay. Finally, I think we started with a nice design of the database, but we added things, and many of the additions were done once the designer no longer worked for us. So now I think it looks more like this kind of thing. And we still need to refine the design. And also, one thing that came up in an earlier conversation, we do want to make this mobile friendly. And it's currently usable on mobile, but not mobile friendly. And once the money presents itself for this kind of project, we will do it. Okay. So future plans. I know I'm fine, but so future plans. So the one big deal is, of course, to connect, to link, to connect, to be interoperable with other things. So, of course, Sarit, it's not a coincidence that Sarit and PANDiT rhyme. It's intentional, and we want to connect to all the works in Sarit. And also to be able to suck that information that's there in TEI, the metadata about authors and works and so on. Namami, I've been in touch with them. They have a collection of more than 2 million manuscripts. Data are poor, but still 2 million manuscripts. It's a lot. But it's also an exaggeration to say that I've been in touch with them, because I've written and they didn't write back. But I'll be in Delhi in the summer, and I'll just knock on their doors with the Sudha Gopalakrishnan, who's working with me. So again, somebody mentioned Sahapedia earlier today. We're working with Sahapedia, library catalogs. We have bibliography, okay? We have 35,000 print items. And the way we imported them was very imperfect, okay? We could not write a good enough code to put all the information that Karl Potter wrote in his idiosyncratic way, that you as a person would know exactly what it meant, but the computer would have no clue to know whether it's a family name or a journal name, or believe me, it's a mess, okay? So we did what we could do with it, because our mission is not the bibliography, it's the relationship between the bibliography and the items on our database. But it would be very nice to actually give all that data and instead be connected to a serious bibliographical database, like a library or a consortium of libraries. But unfortunately, many of these items are not even there on WorldCat. So again, this is a problem. I'd love to connect with your project on bibliography, and if this could be connected to something, it should also be on PANDiT. Again, not everything we work with has to be physically on PANDiT. The links can be made, or data can be transformed. And I know Jim will talk about this tomorrow, about ways of getting and transferring data. So I'm very open to this, lexicographical sources of the type that we saw earlier today, and so on. So this is one way we want to move on. Then everything I showed you so far is just the basics, okay? It's just the structure of the data, but not what we do with the data, right? That's grade 2. We're only in grade 1 of the School of Digital Humanities. But really what we want to be able to do is to create, or hopefully people will create, tools that do something with the data, that do maps. Oh yeah, and one thing I should mention here, geographical websites. If there is a really good geographical website, we don't have to, we can connect to that for each and every site, right? We don't have to create all the data for Benares or Tanjore. There are people who are professional with geography. We're not professional. We should be able to connect to them. So, but now that we have if we'll have all the data, we'll be able to create maps of how text moved, how people moved, family trees, paramparas. Those moving diagrams that always impress me, and I don't know exactly what they do, but they look very impressive, and so on. Another thing, of course, we're looking into is new imports. This is, of course, the big prize, the NCC. I was in touch, and am in touch with the Vice Chancellor of the University of Madras, and to my surprise, he didn't say no. Nor did he say yes either. So maybe I'm just totally deluding myself, but I was very shocked that he didn't say an outright no to my request to get the NCC. This would be like the jackpot. but there are other options, the history of Dharma Shastra, but that's still copyrighted, so I can't just use it. I'm working with people who created the Sanskrit Manuscript Project at Cambridge. I actually, one thing that we're on the verge of doing, but are not doing, even though we received the rights for, is the Pingree CES project, the 5 volumes of the, Andrew, can you tell me what CES stands for? The catalog? Census. Yeah, so census of the exact sciences in Sanskrit, right? Yeah. This is a 5-volume, hugely accurate, hugely important catalog. And we applied for, with the help of Sheldon Pollock, we received the permission to use all the data there into PANDiT. But there's another team supposedly also working on that, and I don't want to, I think it's stupid that 2 teams would work on the same project, so I'm trying to get them to work with me. And things like that, okay? So that is the, maybe I'll stop here, take questions, and then maybe I'll say something. I won't have time to teach you how to work with PANDiT, but I want to give you 2 tips. So I'll do that after if there's any question.
Thank you, Yigal, for introducing this very robust platform, the Facebook of Indian texts, maybe. I have 2 questions. The first one is, what are Indic texts? And this question breaks down to many levels, right? Pre-modern, modern, and languages. But just to touch on one aspect is the transliteration standards here. We know, for example, the macron over A and O for Dravidian-based languages could raise a problem here in standardization. So, but the big question that we can say now with the big question of what are the purview and the limits of Indic text? That's the first question. And the second one is, can you, I don't know, help think about the, not rhetoric, but the strategies for arguing in grant proposals for the component of PANDiT? That's the second question.
I didn't ask you what bhakti is when you gave your presentation. I mean, the definitions are fuzzy, okay? I'm not worried about them right now. Let's be honest. I don't have a good answer for that, and I'm not troubled by that fact. That there will be maybe a point in time in 10 or 50 or 100 years where somebody would be troubled and wonder, should this go in something like PANDiT or should this go in something like Southeast Asia? I don't care at this point. And secondary literature, again, it's not the main mission, but I'm open for everything. So I'm not worried about this. I don't have an answer, but I'm not worried by that fact. Now, for grant applications, I think that strengthens the grant application. That was our experience with SSHRC. That was our experience with the ERC. You show that there is a project that is already running, that's already in the air. It doesn't have to be invented. It doesn't have to be created from zero. It's ready immediately to receive all the data that you will produce already have with your project, and it's open. It's the grant agencies want to know about the distribution of the outcomes of your research. So you can tell them, look, there's a ready thing that you can just download all the data that I'll put in there. Everybody in the world can enjoy it. It's free, and there will be credit for the granting agency and so on. So I think it tremendously strengthens the application that you're working with a partner that's already operative and ready to get whatever you're giving, in the sense that many other projects say, we will slowly and gradually develop something, and granting agencies are cautious about this for a good reason. So I think there are, and I'm, again, for each of these partnerships and collaborations, I'm happy to to help in writing the language for the PANDiT part, and then you can edit it. But I'm happy to help.
So I apologize if you might have addressed this when I stepped out, but in some of the relations that a student is purported to have to a teacher, or somebody is attributed a text, is there a way of marking that something is kind of suspicious,
Yes.
doubtful?
Yes.
Is there a way of even grading that?
Yes. Okay, this is an excellent question that we gave a great deal of thought to from the get-go. And this is this. If you look at the way SKSEC was designed, you can't look into it, but I was there and I can tell you that basically it was a very kind of, if I may say so, an anal model of data collection. So for each and every bit of information, there was a field telling you how you got that bit of information, which means there was basically a footnote for every line, okay? What was now that's wonderful in an ideal world, but in our world, in the Kali Yuga, the meaning is that nobody enters that kind of information. So you have zillions and billions of empty fields. So we decided that the trade-off is such that we don't want to do that. And instead, in the description of every entity, you can put in a free text whatever doubts and thoughts you have about the data in other places, except for dates. For dates, you can put either circa or actual dates. I think that's the only exception. But again, there are so many fields in the database that I can't remember. So yes, the decision was to let go of our anxieties about the quality of the data and go for quantity and record our doubts in the free description field. Yeah.
We have a question back here.
Thanks. So I want to, I don't know if it's wise to let go of all the anxieties, because when I hear someone give a talk that they're, you've repeated a couple times that you're not worried about this, or you're not looking at that, you don't know what your coders, I mean, like at least on 3 occasions, you said, well, I'm not sure what they're doing, but, is it wise to necessarily be that cavalier when you are creating or trying to contribute to a knowledge body that has historically, at least since 1835, if not for years before that, been marginalized, been trivialized, been treated diminutive in the larger corpus of literary or cultural expression on the global stage? Is it wise to kind of just I don't know, blow those things off like so many times in one talk? Because I feel very uneasy with that, and maybe I'm not understanding it, but I think that that can come across in a way that you might not want it to.
Okay, I take the comment. Maybe my personal style of presentation is not serious as I think the work is, but I by no means think that what we're doing is cavalier. Okay, I am giving the keys to the best scholars in the world, and I don't want to second guess a scholar on Marathi Bhakti just because I'm a Sanskrit scholar who thinks highly of himself. So I don't want to do that. I am giving the keys to the best people in the field. Initially now you can say, but you're giving the keys to graduate students, you're giving the keys to, you don't have a serious mechanism of information control, of quality control. And you're right about that. But the crowd is a very good system of quality control. And there have been studies, for example, about, well, about how Wikipedia can be at least as good as the Britannica Encyclopedia. So I don't want to put myself, I initially thought of that, but I don't want to put myself in the position of an editor who knows better than other people, except for my own field. And if people insert knowledge that is 99% accurate, somebody will come and correct that additional percent who is in that field. So I think I'm not at all being cavalier about this, and our problem right now is getting the best people involved. And once they get involved, if other people also get involved, then we will deal with that problem as well. I'm not denying that. I'm keeping the option open of having editorial committees, of having an editorial board, and so on. But right now we want people to contribute and edit one another, and I think that would be a very good model. That's I don't think of as cavalier at all.
One more question, I think.
I wanted to know is the project what the project will do with illuminated manuscripts and images in these manuscripts. You're already
Which
doing
manuscripts?
so much illuminated manuscripts,
Yeah.
images which begin to appear, right?
Yeah.
Is there a way in which people are going to tag them? I've just begun to look at the site. I have registered. I'm waiting for your approval. By the way,
I was busy the last hour.
I'm sorry.
I'll do it immediately. Look, again, PANDiT is a database for metadata. Okay, so it's not necessarily meant for all the manuscripts to actually be there, but for information about the manuscripts to be there. But if we have the rights, there's no reason why images from the manuscripts cannot be there as well. It's just that yeah. I see. Good point. No, good point. It may be that a field is missing in the manuscript entity. Yeah, good point. Thanks. Okay, Jim, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm interested in the processes that you have in place for ingesting data. And this is for something that'll occur offline. We could continue this conversation, but we at one stage went through all of Emino's amazing work in the 1930s bibliography produced on Indic texts. And you probably know, of course, he has that 4 or 5 tier deep commentatorial structure that was incorporated into our Indological Books and Series database. But is this something that could be ingested potentially, or is it going to create the sort of headaches that I think you were describing when you talked about Karl Potter's bibliography being added?
We want headaches. We want headaches. We want good problems. This is a good problem. I think definitely, look, there are numerous, PANDiT is, you can think of PANDiT as a database not for books, but for books about books, okay? What you're describing is a book about books and or a resource about books. There are so many of these independent resources in Indology, and nothing actually in the form of connecting them in a kind of a relational program as ours. So I think we very much want to have these headaches and to be able to solve them. Okay. Thank you. So let me conclude by giving you a couple of tips. We didn't have the time for the actual, it was a demo, but not a hands-on demo. You didn't play with the system. So a couple of tips. First, when you create your account, if you haven't done so already, please, 2 things. Your username is your name, okay? So James Nye would be Jim's username, and Yigal Bronner will be mine, okay? That's important so we can give you credit appropriately. And secondly, upload your photo, okay? Because if you don't, the tech person Amir Simantov, who's created this entire system, will get very angry at me, and that can be bad. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing, when you create or edit an entity, the first and most important thing to check is whether this entity already exists on PANDiT. Okay, we don't want to insert new duplications. Okay, this may happen, but we're trying to avoid this. Okay, so if you are working on Venkata or Krishna or Yadava, there will be Yadavas and Krishnas already there in the website. Go open all of them in separate tabs and make sure that they are different. And if you're not sure, don't go ahead. Make further questions and inquirements and explorations until you're sure, okay? Then go ahead, create or modify and connect. Again, always whenever you get to a new thing, the beginning is always a steep curve because you have a lot of information about even a single work, the author, the place, the text, the manuscripts, whatever. So in the beginning, you will be working with a lot of open windows, okay, open tabs. But eventually, this will pay off for your own research because you will be able to connect it to all the other data. Okay, again, with each and every new entity, make sure it doesn't already exist. And if it does, connect what you're doing to something that exists. And finally, try to put as much data as you can in one session, okay? And not hit save until you said as much as you can in one sanely human session about that entity. And the reason is simple. If we create a lot of revisions for just, oh, I forgot, and oh, I forgot this, and oh, I forgot that, it's unnecessary weight on the system that we can just avoid. Okay, so these are my tips. But other than this, the car is yours, and please test drive it. Okay, I honestly believe that this is not a cavalier approach, but a welcoming approach to the scholarly community to get involved in this.